Hello. From the 1970s into the 1990s, detectives kept walking into scenes that carried the same brutal fingerprints. Victims found with wrists and ankles cinched tight, skins swollen and rubbed raw from bindings, and throats ringed with the clear pressure marks of ligature strangulation. In some homes, furniture was out of place, like a struggle had been controlled, not chaotic. Cords missing from blinds, a belt or rope that should have been there suddenly gone, a phone line yanked or cut. The injuries weren't random. They told one ugly story. Someone took control first and only then took a life. And that's when the horror landed where it hurt most, because these weren't back alleys. They were ordinary houses in Wichita and in nearby Park City, Kansas. Safe streets, familiar porches, places where people believed the worst thing that could happen was a storm rolling in. After that, the fear didn't fade between headlines. It spread into habits. Doors stayed locked in daylight. Curtains stayed drawn at night. A knock on the door stopped feeling normal and started feeling like a test. Wichita wasn't just scared of a killer, it was scared of how easily home could be turned into a trap. Then the pattern became so clear it almost looked like a signature, but the name didn't come from the city. He named himself. In letters sent to the media, the killer branded his crimes with 3 words he wanted Wichita to remember: BTK, bind, torture, kill. It wasn't a nickname locals casually gave him. It was a label he chose on purpose, a way to turn terror into an identity and force the public to say his words out loud. So here's the question that still hits like a punch. What was BTK's real motive, and who exactly was he hunting? To understand the mystery, we have to rewind to 1974. On January 15, 1974, a Tuesday in Wichita, Kansas, the air capital, the city was in a period of steady growth. The Otero family lived there, quietly, normally. The father, Joseph Otero, was 38, hard-working, steady. He and his wife Julie had 5 children, 7 people under one roof, warm, ordinary, close. That morning, as usual, the parents took the 3 older kids to school. At home were 2 younger children, an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old, waiting for their parents to come back. After the school run, the parents came back home. They were enjoying a brief pocket of peace when a car pulled up nearby. A figure stepped out, slipped over the backyard fence, and cut the phone line like he'd done it before. He left a small knife in the grass behind the house, and just as he was about to enter, the 9-year-old stepped out back with the dog, straight into a stranger's path. The intruder flashed a handgun and leveled it at the child. Too young to understand what he was looking at, the boy asked, almost curious, "Mister, are you playing a game with me?" The man didn't answer. He just nodded toward the house. The boy hesitated, then obeyed. The man followed closely behind. Inside, Joseph and Julie froze. Their youngest son had a gun pointed at his head. Now the older child understood what was happening. She burst into tears. The intruder spoke flatly and claimed he was a fugitive from California. He warned them not to move. If they did, he would shoot. With the gun in play, the parents didn't dare resist. They followed his orders and told the children to lie on the floor. Then he forced them into a bedroom and tied them up. The bindings were brutally tight. Their arms and legs went numb, circulation cut off, pain blooming fast. They begged him to loosen the ropes. He didn't. Then he turned toward Julie with another cord and killed her. The children screamed, grief and panic, then tried to choke it back, terrified the neighbors would hear. The intruder pulled a plastic bag, then 2 T-shirts, then another bag, and covered the 9-year-old's head. And then it got worse. He dragged the 11-year-old down to the basement. He restrained her down there. He asked if the house had a camera, saying he wanted to record this moment. When she was told no, he said, "You'll go to heaven like the rest of them." And then he hanged her in the basement. When it was over, he walked out and drove off, calm as if nothing had happened. But a short distance away, he remembered the knife he'd left behind, and he turned back. He returned to the scene, retrieved it, and narrowly avoided exposing himself. That evening, when the older kids came home, there was no dinner, no voices, no movement. They found their parents and their 2 younger siblings dead. Horror and grief hit them all at once. They tried to call the police, but the phone line had been cut. Desperate, they ran to a neighbor for help. Police got there fast. The home was a modest, single-story house. What officers found inside was beyond anything they expected. Even seasoned cops were shaken. 4 lives had been taken with ruthless cruelty. The scene made it clear the killer had planned the attack, and that Joseph Otero was also killed, not just Julie and the 2 children. At that time, security cameras were not common. Police could only canvass the neighborhood and question residents, but it felt like searching for a needle in a haystack. The Oteros were known as kind, friendly people who didn't have conflicts in the neighborhood. So who would do this to them, and why kill the children too? The story spread through Wichita like a fever. Police threw resources at the case, but nothing solid surfaced. The Otero murders became a dark stain on the city, unresolved, unanswered.
On April 4, 1974, tragedy struck again. Catherine Bright, 21, came home with her brother Kevin, 19, and found an intruder already inside. During the struggle, Kevin fought back and managed to escape. He ran down the street screaming for help, but his sister wasn't as lucky. She was stabbed and died from her wounds. The intruder fled. Kevin couldn't see the face clearly, and later reporting ties a black Jeep Cherokee to BTK-era surveillance around a later drop, not as a confirmed vehicle ID from the Bright attack. The similarities between the 2 cases were alarming. Home invasion, extreme violence, and police couldn't ignore the possibility it was the same offender. For the next nearly 3 years, Wichita saw no similar murders. But it was only the quiet before the next hit. On March 17, 1977, Shirley Vian Relford, 24, was murdered in her own home. Her 3 young children witnessed the nightmare. According to their statements, the attacker wore a mask, tied their mother to the bed, put a plastic bag over her head, and strangled her. Even worse, he seemed ready to kill the children too, but their screaming and a sudden ringing phone spooked him and he fled. The children survived by inches. Police were forced to refocus on the earlier murders. They had a grim feeling the killer was back. Fear settled over Wichita again. People tried to lock down their routines, stay alert, protect their families. And 9 months later, death came again. On December 8, 1977, Nancy Jo Fox, 25, became the next victim. This time, the killer was even bolder. After the murder, he called the police from a public payphone. With a taunting tone, he told them Nancy Fox was dead in her home and dared them to go find her. The call enraged police and piled on pressure like they'd never felt before. They realized they weren't dealing with a normal murderer. They were dealing with someone narcissistic and sexually motivated, someone who craved attention and fed off the reaction to his crimes. While the investigation struggled, on February 10, 1978, the killer mailed a letter to Wichita TV station KAKE. In it, he claimed responsibility for the murders of the Oteros, Catherine Bright, Shirley Vian, and Nancy Fox. He gave himself a name, BTK. He explained it with arrogant pride, bind, torture, kill, and demanded the public call him that. In the letter, he complained the media didn't give him enough attention. He asked how many more people he had to kill before his name would make national headlines. It exposed the sickness at his core, the hunger to kill and the hunger to be seen doing it. He even attached a poem mocking Nancy Fox like he was showing off a masterpiece. The tone was pure arrogance. He claimed his motive came from some mysterious factor X, describing it like a supernatural force. He compared himself to the Grim Reaper. The station immediately handed the letter to police. Investigators tried something unusual. They flashed a split-second subliminal message during an evening newscast as a signal to BTK. It showed a pair of eyeglasses turned upside down with words telling him to call the police chief right away. The glasses had been found at one victim's home, and police hoped this would lure him into contact, but BTK stayed silent. Police could only warn the public that BTK didn't follow a predictable schedule. He might disappear for long stretches, then strike again. And beyond hoping there would be no more victims, they seemed powerless. BTK could sense the police were stuck, and he fed off it. He mailed more taunting letters, mocking investigators and daring them to catch up. People in Wichita lived on edge, jumping at shadows, double-checking locks, watching windows. No one knew when BTK would surface again. Tension settled over the entire city. Time passed. 11 years had gone by since BTK's first known attack, and just when people started to believe the nightmare might finally be over, he woke up again. On April 27, 1985, he killed Maureen Hedge, 53, in Park City, Kansas. He dumped her body in a remote ditch and covered it with weeds, like throwing away trash. On September 16, 1986, Vicky Weger, 28, became his next victim. Then he vanished again, silent, hidden, waiting. On January 19, 1991, Dolores Davis, 62, was the next victim. Her body was found under a bridge on February 1, 1991, after a 15-year-old followed his dog beneath it. By then, BTK had taken 10 innocent lives, and after years of work, the police investigation still hadn't broken through. BTK moved like smoke. He left little behind at scenes, then seemed to evaporate. After the final murder in 1991, BTK went quiet. For 13 years, he did not commit another known killing, but that didn't mean he was gone.
In 2004, he resurfaced, sending a series of letters and packages to Wichita area media. On March 19, 2004, the Wichita Eagle received a letter signed Bill Thomas Kilman, and in it, the writer claimed he was the one who killed the 1986 victim. And in that same year, investigators received long-awaited news from the lab. Scientists had recovered male DNA of unknown identity from beneath the 1986 victim's fingernails. Police began DNA testing hundreds of men, more than 1,300 samples in total, before the samples were later destroyed by court order. The campaign consumed huge resources and stirred anger and fear about privacy. In the end, police collected about 1,300 samples, but none matched, and under a court order tied to privacy concerns, the samples were destroyed. Around this time, the Wichita Eagle ran a piece marking 30 years since the Otero family murders, and unexpectedly, BTK, silent for years, seemed to rage when he read it. He believed the article didn't mention him enough. He felt ignored. So he tried to seize the spotlight again, sending new threatening letters to the newspaper and police. Investigators went on high alert, afraid he would kill again. But this time, his goal didn't seem to be murder. It seemed to be a game, cat and mouse, with the entire city watching. He began creating dolls posed like victims, sealing them in boxes, then hiding those death boxes around the city. Afterward, he would call police or media and drop vague hints, luring them into a scavenger hunt.
In February 2005, BTK sent another letter to police, full of smug confidence. He asked something that sounded almost playful. Can I communicate with floppy and not be traced to a computer? Be honest. He wanted to test whether he could still slip away. Police took the opening. Police answered via a coded classified ad in the Wichita Eagle, "Rex, it will be okay," signaling, falsely, that a floppy disk couldn't be traced. On February 16, 2005, BTK sent a floppy disk to Wichita TV station KSAS-TV. On the disk, investigators found a file that mattered. Technical analysis traced the document's metadata back to Christ Lutheran Church in Wichita. The file appeared to be saved under a username connected to a man named Dennis. Following that lead, investigators learned a church council member shared that name, Dennis Rader, living in Park City. Police went to Rader's home, but they didn't rush it. They watched him from a distance, and investigators linked a black Jeep Cherokee to BTK-era surveillance around a later drop, and when they drove by Rader's home, a black Jeep Cherokee was parked outside, but this wasn't a confirmed match to the Bright case witness description. Dennis Rader now looked like a real candidate for the name BTK, but suspicion and coincidence weren't enough. Police needed hard proof. Investigators learned Dennis Rader was nearing 60, married with 2 children, a son and a daughter. Police obtained a warrant to test a pap smear taken from his daughter at the Kansas State University Medical Clinic. Police obtained the sample and compared it to the male DNA recovered in the 1986 case. The result was stunning. The 2 DNA profiles showed a close biological relationship. That connection all but confirmed what investigators feared was true. Dennis Rader, Carrie's father, was BTK. On February 25, 2005, with solid evidence in hand, police arrested him. They launched a sweeping search: car, home, property, everything. Investigators found troubling material on his computer. In an outdoor shed, they recovered items that deepened the case: black socks, a mask, and a cylindrical container. When Rader's family learned the man they'd lived with for years was BTK, they were shattered. To them, Dennis Rader had always seemed gentle, an ordinary husband and a loving father. They couldn't reconcile that image with a killer who had lived 2 lives, but the truth was now unavoidable. Rader's daughter had been close to him since childhood. He took her fishing. In her mind, he was patient, kind, protective, never someone to fear. She remembered hearing about BTK for the first time and being comforted by her father, who told her everything would be okay. She never imagined the man reassuring her was the man causing the terror. For her, it became a nightmare with no exit. After his arrest, Dennis Rader was eerily calm. He seemed focused on practical concerns: what punishment he'd face, how comfortable prison would be, whether other inmates might harm him. During interrogation, he confessed to his crimes. He admitted the first case was in January 1974, the Otero family. He claimed his original target was Julie Otero. For 2 months before the attack, he watched her routine and learned how she moved through her mornings. He had wanted to strike elsewhere, but he couldn't find the right moment. In the end, he broke into the home despite the risk. Even with multiple people inside, he did not hesitate. He killed one by one. Afterward, he described feeling a rush, like he'd stepped into a darker world and discovered he liked it there. What fed his ego even more was that police didn't catch him, and that escape made him bolder.
3 months later, he targeted Catherine Bright. He called it an operation, like murder was a project plan. He approached the house, caught his way in, and waited. But something happened he hadn't planned for. Catherine returned home with her brother. Rader pulled a gun on them and pretended to be a desperate fugitive who needed money and food. Because he hadn't brought proper restraints, he used what he found, towels and bed sheets, to bind them.
He separated them into different rooms, then he turned up the stereo volume, trying to drown out whatever sounds might follow. He went to the brother first, trying to remove what he saw as the bigger threat, but the brother managed to break loose and fight back. In the chaos, Rader fired a shot. The brother dropped to the floor and played dead. Rader didn't verify what happened. He moved to Catherine. Catherine screamed in panic. Afraid neighbors would hear, Rader changed course and stabbed her. At that moment, the brother suddenly bolted from the house, sprinting and screaming for help. Rader panicked, ran to his vehicle, and escaped. Because he wore a mask, the survivor couldn't identify his face. That near disaster shook Rader, and he went quiet for years. Then, in May 1977, he returned and found a new target, Shirley, a 24-year-old single mother. He later claimed his first intended target that day wasn't home, and he chose someone else instead. He approached a child outside and used a lie to gain trust, presenting a photo and pretending to be an investigator. He used the child to get to the front door. When Shirley appeared, he forced his way inside at gunpoint. He locked the children in a bathroom and blocked the door to keep them contained. Then he attacked Shirley. The children's cries echoed behind the closed door. He later admitted he considered killing them too, until a ringing phone startled him and he fled. The children survived. 9 months later, he targeted Nancy Fox, 25. He even gave the crime a mission name like it was a hunt. He broke into her home, controlled the scene, and killed her. Before leaving, he whispered a claim that was pure ego, that he was BTK. Then he did something new. He went to a payphone and called police to report the murder. It was his first direct contact with police. The interaction thrilled him, like he was playing a dangerous game and winning. After that, he sent letters to announce the BTK name publicly. In his twisted thinking, it wasn't just killing. He saw them as creative work, something he wanted recognized. The less attention he got, the more he tried to force attention back onto himself. In 1979, he targeted Anna Williams, 63. He broke into her home and waited for hours, but she never came back. Frustrated, he left. Anna survived, never knowing how close she had come. After that, Rader slipped back into his double life. He returned to his family, to work, to the role of a normal husband and father. No one around him could imagine what he hid underneath. 6 quiet years passed. Then, in May 1985, the urge rose again. He chose Maureen Hedge, 53, and gave it another planned name, one whose meaning remains unclear. He chose her partly because she lived near him. He wanted to know what it felt like to plan a murder close to home. He cut her phone line, hid, and waited. When she returned, he emerged, controlled her, killed her, and took photos and souvenirs. But his fantasy didn't end there. He transported her body to Christ Lutheran Church, where he served on the church council and had access to keys. He brought her into that sacred building and tried to create a private stage for his darkness. Before morning, he cleaned up, then drove away and dumped her body in a remote ditch. A year later, he noticed Vicki Wagerly, 28, and began stalking her. He called it the piano plan after hearing piano music near her home. He posed as a telephone repairman, entered with conversation and calm manners, then attacked. Afterward, he photographed the scene and left. He later drove by and saw police already at the house. It was a close call, too close. The danger sobered him, and once again he disappeared. 5 years later, in 1991, he set his sights on Dolores Davis, a woman living alone. He named the plan after a dog pen near her home. He watched her, learned her habits, and noticed security measures that made his usual approach harder, so he invented a workaround, breaking a window to draw her out, then forcing his way in. That night, he walked instead of driving, trying to reduce traceable evidence. He crossed a long, lonely route in darkness until he reached her home. He waited, then created a loud disturbance. When she investigated, he used his familiar lie, claiming he was on the run. She refused and threatened to call police. He threatened her back, and under fear, she opened the door. He entered, controlled her, and killed her. He drove her car to a remote bridge area and dumped her body in brush. Then he did something bizarre. He threw the car keys onto a roof, copying a trick he'd read in a detective novel meant to confuse investigators. Hearing this confession, police were horrified. These victims were strangers to him. He attacked because he wanted to. The lack of logic, killing purely to satisfy an internal urge, was chilling. And it didn't stop there. He admitted to taking personal items as trophies and living inside private fantasies that grew darker over time.
So how does a person become that? The story circles back to his childhood. Dennis Rader was born in 1945 in Pittsburgh, Kansas. His parents were ordinary working people. He was the oldest of 4 children. As a boy, he spent time living with relatives in Wichita. With parents constantly working and little attention at home, he became isolated and inward. In his teen years, he showed disturbing behaviors, hurting animals, cross-dressing in secret, spying on neighbors, but he hid it well. To outsiders, he looked like a polite, well-behaved kid. In school, he was average. He later joined the U.S. Air Force, and that period influenced ideas that surfaced in his later crimes. After discharge, he moved to Park City, worked locally, and married Paula. From the outside, he built a normal family life. Later, he worked for a security company in Wichita installing home alarm systems. The irony was brutal. Some customers hired him because they feared BTK, never suspecting the installer was the killer. In 1991, he became a council member at Christ Lutheran Church in Wichita. In May 1991, he became a dog catcher and compliance officer in Park City. Officially, his job was to capture stray animals and respond to complaints, but neighbors later said he sometimes used that authority to intimidate and harass single women. Some sought restraining orders, others moved away to escape him. 31 years after BTK's first known murder, the case finally reached court in 2005. Dennis Rader was charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder and other serious offenses. In court, prosecutors laid out the timeline of terror. From 1974 to 1991, he murdered 10 people in Wichita and Park City. Most of his victims were women who had little chance to defend themselves. They didn't know him. They died because of his compulsions and his twisted need for control. Prosecutors presented evidence, including items tied to his crimes. Facing the charges, Rader pleaded guilty. He spent about 30 minutes delivering an apology to victims' families, but his face stayed flat, his eyes cold, with no obvious real remorse. Prosecutors said the apology sounded rehearsed, like an awards speech. Defense attorneys argued he suffered from severe mental disorders. They cited narcissistic personality traits, obsessive-compulsive behaviors, and extreme antisocial personality disorder, and asked for leniency. The judge rejected it. After the proceedings, the jury reached a unanimous decision. The court convicted Dennis Rader on all counts. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms without parole, effectively 175 years. That meant he would die in prison. He was sent to El Dorado Correctional Facility, a high-security prison. To prevent retaliation from other inmates, he was held in isolation, and rumors spread that, aside from his daughter, few people ever visited him. Even today, the man who terrorized a city spends his last years behind bars. The sentence is the law's answer to what he did, but what BTK left behind is a scar, deep in the memory of those communities, a reminder that even in neighborhoods that look quiet and safe, darkness can be hiding in plain sight. That's where today's file closes. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.